All right, this is a straight read through of Chapter 3 of Mason and Dixon. I was not there when they met, or not in the usual way. I later heard from them how they remembered meeting. I tried to record in what I then projected as a sort of spiritual daybook, what I could remember of what they said, though 'twas too often abridged by the day's fatigue. Writing in your sleep, too, cried the twins. Oh, children, I even dreamed in those days, but only long after the waking traverse was done. How so be it, scarcely have they met in the saloon of Mason's Inn at Portsmouth. Then Mason finds himself coming the old London hand, before Dixon's clear stupefaction with that town. Ugh, fellow was spitting at my shoes? Another pushing folk one by one into the gutters? Some of them quite dangerous to look at? How can you dwell that closely together, day upon day, without all growing murderous? Oh, one may, if one wishes, find insult at every step, from insolent stares to mortal assault, an orgy of insult, uninterrupted. Yet how does one proceed to call out each offender in turn, or choosing among 'em, in obedience to what code? So one soon understands it as yet another term in the contract between the city and oneself, a function of simple density, ensuring that there never be time enough to acknowledge, let alone to resent, such a mad variety of offered offense. Just so. Why, back in Bishop, it might take half a night to find an excuse to clash someone in the face, whilst in London, 'tis the paradise of the quarrelsome for fair. You'd appreciate Wapping High Street then. And Tyburn. Of course, put that on your list. Alluring out there, is it? Mason explains, though without his precise reason for it, that for the past year or more it has been his practice to attend the Friday hangings at that melancholy place, where he was soon chatting up hangmen and their prentices while standing them pints at their local, the Bridgeport Dagger, acquiring thus a certain grisly intimacy with the art. Mason has been shoved about and borne along in riots of sailors, attempting to wrest from bands of medical students the bodies of shipmates come to grief ashore, too far from the safety of the sea. And he's had his purse and his person assaulted by agents public and private. Yet, there's nothing like it. It's London at its purest, he cries. You must come out there with me, soon as we may. Taking it for the joke it must surely be, Dixon laughs. Oh, that's a funny one. All right. Mason, shrugging, palms up. I'm serious. Worse than that, I'm sober. A man's first time in town, he simply can't miss a hanging. Come, sir. What's the first thing they'll ask you when you get back to County Durham? Eh? Did you see them raid the Air Tyburn? Is it too many nights alone on top of that famed hill in Greenwich? Can this man, living in one of the great cities of Christendom, not know how to behave around people? Dixon decides to register only annoyance. No, the first thing they'll ask, did you understand them the way they talk down here? Oh, damn, I say, I didn't mean. So Dixon, for the second time in 2 minutes, finds himself laughing without the mordicus of honest mirth. This time a Mr. Mason, how you do go on laugh, sidewise and forbearing, the laugh of a hired foil. Yet feeling it his duty to set them at ease, he begins, well, there's this Jesuit, this Corsican, and this Chinaman, and they're all riding in a great coach going up to Bath, and the fourth passenger is a very proper Englishwoman who keeps giving them these scandalized glances. Finally, able to bear it no longer, the Corsican, being the most hot-headed of the three, bursts out, and I hope you'll excuse my Corsican accent. He says, "Hey, lady, what are you looking at?" And she says, Mason has been edging away. "Are you crazy?" he whispers. "People are staring. Sailors are staring." Ugh. Mason's nose throbbing redly. "You have heard it then. Apologies." Reaching to clasp Mason's arm, a gesture Mason retreats from in a flinch as free from deliberation as a sneeze. Dixon, withdrawing, broken into a sweat. "Why, it took me weeks of study to fathom that one. But I see you've a brisk brain in your gird there, and I'm pleased to be working with such as it be." Resolutely abeam, pronouncing the forms of you consciously, as if borrowing them from another tongue. The two are staring, one at the other, each with a greatly mistaken impression. Likewise, in some university, likewise, in some uncertainty as to how the power may come to be sorted out betwixt them. Dixon is a couple of inches taller, sloping more than towering, wearing a red coat of military cut with brocade and silver buttons, and a matching red three-cornered hat with some gaudy North Road cockade stuck in it. He will be first to catch the average eye, often causing future strangers to remember them as Dixon and Mason. But the uniform accords with neither his Quaker profession nor his present bearing, a civilian slouch grown lopsided, too often observed, alas, in devotees of the taproom. For Dixon's part, he seems disappointed in Mason, or so the astronomer, ever inclined to suspicion, fears. "What is it? What are you looking at?" "It's my wig, isn't it?" "You're not wearing a wig." "Just so. You noted that. You have been observing me in a strange, yet I must conclude, meaningful way." "Don't know. Happen I was expecting someone a bit more odd?" Mason a squint. "I'm not odd enough for you?" "Well, it is a peculiar station in life, isn't it? How many royal astronomers are there? How many royal astronomers' assistants are there likely to be? It takes an odd bird to stay up peering at stars all night in the first place, doesn't it? On the other hand, surveyors are running about as numerous as bedbugs, and twice as cheap, with work enough for all certainly in Durham at present, enclosures all over the county, and North Yorkshire, fences, hedges, ditches, ordinary and ha-ha style, all to be laid out. I could have stayed home and had myself a fine living." They did mention a background in land surveying, Mason in some surprise, but that's it? Hedges? Ha-has? Well, actually, the Durham ha-ha boom subsided a bit after Lord Lambton fell into his. Cursed had it filled in with coal spoil. Why, did you think I was another lens fellow? Oh, Lord, no. I mean, I've been taught the lot. Celestial mechanics, all the weighty lads, Laplace and Kepler, Aristarchus, the other fellow, what's his name? But that's all ganometry, isn't it? Yet you, how shall he put this tactfully? You have looked, through, Dixon smiles at him encouragingly. "Why, my old teacher, Mr. Emerson, has a fine telescope, I believe the word is, encased in barrel staves, though it be. And many's the evening I've admired the phases of Venus. Aye, those, and the moons of Jupiter, too. The mountains and craters of our own moon. And did you see that latest eclipse? Canny! Mr. Bird as well has shared his instruments, being kind enough, in fact, just in this last fortnight, to help me practice my observing and computing skills, though so mercilessly that I was in some doubt for days whether we'd parted friends." Mason, having expected some shambling wild country fool remains amiably puzzled before the tidy Dixon here presented, who for his own part, having despite talk of oddity, expected but another overdressed London climber, is amused at Mason's nearly invisible turnout, all in snuffs and buffs and grays. Mason is nodding glumly. I must seem an ass. If this is as bad as it gets, I can abide that. As long as the spirits don't run out. Nor the wine. Wine. Dixon is now squinting. Mason wonders what he's done this time. Grape or grain, but never the twain, as me granduncle George observed to me more than once. Vine with corn, beware the morn. Of the two sorts of drinking folk, this implies, that is, great people and grain people. You will now inform me of your membership in the Brotherhood of the Grape, and that you seldom, if ever, touch ale or spirits, am I correct? Happily so. I should imagine, as given a finite supply, there'd be more for each of us. It's like Jack Sprat, isn't it? Oh, I'll drink wine if I must. And now we're entered upon the topic. And as we are in Portsmouth, after all, there cannot lie too distant some room where each of us may consult what former vegetation pleases him. Dixon looks outside at the ebbing wintry sunlight. Nor too early, I guess. We're sailing to the Indies. Heaven knows what's available on board or out there. It may be our last chance for a civilized drink. Sooner we start, the better in that case. As the day darkens and the first flames appear, sometimes reflected as well in panes of glass, the sounds of the stables and the alleys grow louder, and chimney smoke perambulates into the Christmas-tide air. The room puts on its evening cloak of shifting amber light and sinuous folds of shadow. Mason and Dixon become aware of a jostling murmur of expectancy. All at once, out of the murk, a dozen mirrored lanterns have leapt alight together. As into their glare now strolls a somewhat disheveled Norfolk terrier with a raffish gleam in his eye, whilst from somewhere less illuminate comes a sprightly overture upon horn, clarinet, and cello, in time to which the dog steps back and forth in his bright ambit. Ask me anything you please, the learned English dog am I. Well up on everything from fleas unto the king's monogamy. Persian princes, Polish blintzes, Chinaman's geomancy, jumping beans or flying machines, just as it suits your fancy. I quote enough of the classical stuff to set your ears athrob, work logarithmic versed signs, with all within me nub. Only nothing ministerial, please, or I'm apt to lose my job as the learned English dog tonight. There are the usual requests. Does the dog know where the bee sucks? What is the integral of 1 over book D book? Is he married? Dixon notes how his coadjutor to be seems fallen into a sort of magnetical stupor, as mesmerites might term it. More than once, Mason looks ready to leap to his feet and blurt something better kept till later in the evening. At last, the dog recognizes him, though now he is too keyed up to speak with any coherence. After allowing him to rattle for a full minute, the dog sighs deeply. See me later, out and back. It shouldn't take but a minute, Mason tells Dixon. I'll be all right by myself if there's something you'd rather be doing. With no appetite for the giant mutton chop cooling in front of him, Mason moppishly now wraps it and stows it in his coat. Looking up, he notes Dixon, mouth cheerfully stuffed, beaming too tolerantly for his comfort. No, not for me. Did you think I was taking it for myself? 'Tis for the learned dog, rather. Like, I don't know, perhaps a bouquet sent to an actress one admires. A nice chop can never go too far off the mark. Starting a beat late. What? Aye, 'tis a great world for fair, and practices vary, and one man certainly may not comment upon. What are you saying? Dixon ingenuously waving his joint, eyes round his pistols. No offense, sir. Rolling his eyes the moment Mason switches his stare away, then back a bit late to catch them so much as off center. Dixon, why may not there be oracles? For us, in our time, gateways to futurity. That can't all have died with the ancient peoples. Isn't it worth looking ridiculous, at least to investigate this English dog, for its obvious bearing upon metempsychosis, if naught else? There is something else in progress, something Mason cannot quite confide. Happen he's lost someone close, and recently enough to matter. Aye, and he's away pitching ever into the hour heedless, as Dixon remembers himself after his father passed on. I'll come along if I may. Suit yourself, as the medical students like to say. They go out a back door into the inn yard. A leafless tree arches in the light of a single lantern set above a taut gathering of card players, their secret breathing visible for all to try to read. The wigs and wigs, white as the snow on the roof slates, nodding in and out of the shadows. Sailors, mouths ajar, lope by in the lanes. Sailors in slouch hats, sailors in queues, puffing on pipes, eating potatoes, some who will be going back to the ship and some who won't. From old sea wretches with too many explosions in their lives to child shipmen, midshipmen who have yet to hear their first, passing in and out of the doors of ale drapers, naval tailors, sweet shops, gaming lairs, upstart chapels, calling, singing catches, whistling as if the wind had never paid a visit, vomiting as the sea has never caused them to. Happen his dressing room's close by, Dixon suggests? In with the horses, maybe? No one would keep a talking dog in with horses. It'd drive them mad inside of a minute. Occurs often, does it? Where you come from? Gentlemen, in a whisper out of a dark corner, if you'll keep your voices down, I be with you in a thrice. Slowly into their shifting spill of lantern light, tongue aloll, comes the dog, who pauses and to yawn, nods, good evening to you, and leads them at a trot out of the stables, out of the courtyard and down the street, pausing now and then for nasal inquiries. Where are we going? Mason asks. This seems to be all right. The learned English dog stops and pisses. This dog, Mason singing sotto voce, is causing me apprehension. Surely creatures of miracle ought not to. I mean, flying horses. None of them ever. The Sphinx, adds Dixon. My thought precisely. Now, gents, 'tis a sudden large son of Neptune, backed by an uncertain number of comparably drunken shipmates. You've an interest in this dog here. Wished a word with him, only Mason's quick to assure them. Hey, I know you two. You're the ones with all the strange machinery sailing in the Seahorse. Well, you're in luck, for we're all seahorses here. I'm Fender Belly Bodine, captain of the foretop, and these are my mates, cheering. But you can call me Fender. Now, our plan is to snatch this critter, and for you gents to keep it and with your own highly guarded cargo, out of sight of the master at arms until we reach a likely island. Island? Snatch? both surveyors in a bit of a daze. I've been out there more than once to the Indies. There's a million islands out there, each more likely than the last. And I tell you, a handful of sailors with their wits about them, and that talking dog to keep the savages amused. Why, we could be kings. Long life to kings, cry several sailors. Aye, and to cooch girls. And coconut ale. Hold, cautions Mason. I've heard they eat dogs out there. Wrap 'em in palm leaves, Dixon solemnly, and bake 'em on the beaches? First time you turn your back, Mason warns. That dog's going to be some savage's luncheon. Ruff, excuse me, says the learned D. As I seem to be the topic here, I do feel impelled to make an observation. That's all right there, right then, Fido. Bodine making vague petting motions. Trust us, there's a good bow wow. A small, noisy party of fops, macaronis, and lunarians. It is difficult quite to distinguish which has been working its way up the street and into earshot. Through several window panes, moving candlelight appears. Hostlers roll about disgruntled upon feed-sack pillows and beds. Unengaged glimjacks look in to see if they can cast any light on matters. The dog pushes Mason's leg with his head. We may not have another chance to chat, even upon the fly. There is something I must know, Mason hoarsely whispers, in the tone of a lover tormented by doubts. Have you a soul? That is, are you a human spirit reincarnate in as a dog? The LED blinks, shivers, nods in a resigned way. You are hardly the first to ask. Travelers returned from the Japanese islands tell of certain religious puzzles known as the koan, perhaps the most feigned of which concerns your very question, whether a dog hath the nature of the divine Buddha. A reply given by a certain very wise master is, Mo. Mo, repeats Mason thoughtfully. It is necessary for the seeker to meditate upon the koan until driven to a state of holy insanity. And I would recommend this to you in particular. But please do not come to the learned English dog if it's religious comfort you're after. I may be preternatural, but I am not supernatural. 'Tis the age of reason. Ruff. There is ever an explanation at hand, and no such thing as a talking dog. Talking dogs belong with dragons and unicorns. What there are, however, are provisions for survival in a world less fantastic. This, once the only reason men kept dogs was for food, noting that among men no crime was quite as abhorred as eating the flesh of another human. Dog quickly learned to act as human as possible, and to pass this ability on from parents to pups. So we know how to evoke from you, man, one day at a time at least, enough mercy for one day more of life. Nonetheless, however accomplished, our lives are never settled. We go on as tail-wagging Shezeratis, ever a step away from the dread palm leaf, nightly delaying the blades of our masters by telling back to them tales of their humanity. I am but an extreme expression of this process. Oh, I say, dog and palm leaf? What nonsense, comments one of the Lunarians. Really, far too sensitive. I mean, really, dog in palm leaf? Civilized humans have better things to do than to go about drooling after dog and palm leaf, or whatever. Don't we, Algernon? Could you possibly, inquired the terrier, head cocked in some annoyance, not keep saying that? I do not say things like macaroni Italian style, do I? Nor fop fricassee. Why, you beastly little grrr. And your deliberate use of drooling, sir, is vile. The Lunarian reaches for his hanger. Perhaps we may settle this upon the spot, sir. Derek, you're talking to a D.O.G. Though your weapon put me under some handicap, points out the dog. In fairness, I should mention my late feelings of aversion to water, which may, as you know, signal the onset of the hydrophobia. Yes! That which may, as you know, signal the great H. And should I get in past your blade for a few playful nips and manage to, well, break the old skin, why then you should soon have caught the same, eh? Immediately round the dog develops a circle of absence of about a fathom's radius, later recalled by both astronomers as remarkably regular in shape. Nice doggy. Me last ice cake that me mom sent me all the way from Bath. You take it. What think yous? I'll give 2-1 the fop's blood'll be first to show. Sounds fair, says Fender Bodine. I fancy the dog. Anyone else? Aren't we to summon the owners? Suggests Mr. Dixon. The dog has begun to pace back and forth. I am a British dog, sir. No one owns me. Who are the gentleman and lady who were with you in the assembly room? Inquires Mason. You mean the fabulous Jellos? Here they come now. Protect you from sailors, wails Mrs. Jello, approaching at a dead run over the treacherous cobbles of the lane. Oh, no, thank you. That was not in our agreement. Her husband, pulling on his breeches, wiggle-lop, follows at a sleepy amble. Now you apologize for whatever it is you did, and get back in that stable in your lovely straw bed. We were wondering, ma'am, Bodine, with his hat off, quavering angelically, would the little doggy be for sale? Not at any price, Tupman, and be off with you and your rowdy-dowing flock as well. At her voice, a number of sailors, in whose flexibility lies their preservation from the hazards of drink, are seen to freeze. Do not oppose her, Jello advises, for she is a first rate of 100 guns, and her broadside is annihilation. Thank ye, Jello. Slow again, I see. Oh dear, Bodine, putting his hat back on and sighing. Apologies, sir and madam, and much happiness of your dog. You are the owners of this marvel? Inquires Mason. We prefer exhibitors, says Mr. Jello. Damn, they'd better, gruffs the dog as if to himself. Why, here is the Pearl of Sumatra, calls Dixon, who for some while has been growing increasingly desperate for a drink, and a jolly place it seems. Fender Belly's buying, shouts some mischievous sailor, forever unidentified amid the eager rush for the entry of this 5th or 6th most notorious sailor's haunt upon the point. Even in whose climate of general iniquity the Pearl distinguishes itself, much as might one of its eponyms, shining midst the decadent flesh of some oyster taken from the southern sea. How about a slug into your bread room there, Fido? Pray you, call me Fang. Well, and yes, I do like a drop of Romy in the kennel now and then. Inside, seamen of all ranks and ratings mill slowly in a murk of pipe smoke and soot from cheap candles, whilst counter-swirling go a choice assortment of Portsmouth poles in striped and floral gowns whose bold reds, oranges, and purples are taken down in this light, bruised, made oily and worn, with black mixed in everywhere, colors turning over toward night. Both gentlemen note, after a while, that the net motion of the company is away from the secret doors and toward the back of the establishment, where, upon a length of turf fertilized with the blood and droppings of generations of male poultry, beneath a bright inverted cone of lantern light, striking blue, a great ever-stirring knot of smoke, and a defaulter merry beyond the limits of cockfight etiquette, suspended in a basket above the pit. A Welsh main is in progress. Beyond this, a vista of gaming tables may be made out, and further back a rickety labyrinth of rooms for sleeping and or debauchery, all receding like headlands into a mist. The learned D, drawn by the smell of blood in the cockpit, tries to act nonchalant, but what can they expect of him? How is he supposed to ignore the pure edge of blood love? Oh, yawn, yes, of course. Seen it all before, birds slashing one another to death. 16 go in, one comes out alive. Indeed, And a jolly time betwixt, whilst the substance we are not supposed to acknowledge drips and flies everywhere. There, learned, calls Mrs. Jello brusquely. We must leave the birds to their work. Beneath the swaying gamester, the general place of the room keeps profitably hectic. From the labyrinth in back come assorted sounds of greater and lesser ecstasy, along with percussions upon flesh, laughter more or less feigned, furniture a thump, some duetto of viol and Chinese flute, the demented crowing of fighting cocks, waiting their moment, cries in concert at some inaudible turn of a card, or roll of the Fulhams high and low, calls for bitter and three threads rising ever hopeful, like arietas in the shadowed wilderness of rooms. Out where the lamps are fewer and the movements deeper, at least one more grade of intent. At length the dog halts, having led them to where, residing half out of doors, framed in cabled timbers, washed in from a wreck of long ago, an old piece of awning held by a gnawed split, ancient Eufro between her and the sky with its varied menace, sits dark Hepsie, the pythoness of the point. Here, the dog butting at Mason, here is the one you must see. Instantly, Mason concludes, as he would confess months later to Dixon, that it all has to do with Rebecca, his wife, who died 2 years ago this February next. Unable to abandon her, Mason is nonetheless eager to be aboard a ship bound somewhere impossible, long voyages by sea being thought to help his condition, described to him as hypothrenia, or excess in mourning. Somehow, the learned dog has led him to presume there exist safe conduct procedures for the realm of death, that through this dog-revealed crone, he will be allowed at last to pass over and find and visit her and come back, his faith resurrected. That is as much of a leap as can be expected of a melancholic heart. At the same time, he smokes that the learned English D, or Fang, as now he apparently wishes to be known, in introducing them thus, is pursuing an entirely personal end. Angelo said there'd be a package for me. Quotha, am I the evening coach, the true rummage about in the shadows? Look yet, I'll be seeing him later, and I'll be sure to ask. Just what you said last time, the dog shaking his head reprovingly. Here then, a sacrifice, direct from me, own meager mess, a bit of stewed hen, is the best I can do for you today. Peace, grandam, reclaim thy ort. The learned one has yet to sink quite that low. The dog, with an expressive swing of his head, makes a dignified exit. No more than one wag of the tail per step. Your ship will be put to sea upon a Friday. Hepsie greets Mason and Dixon. Would that be a boatswain's pipe into the ear of either of you gents? Why, the collier sailors believe 'tis bad luck, Dixon replies, as if back at Woolwich before his examiners, it being the day of Christ's execution. Nicely, sir. Thus does your Captain Smith disrespect Christ, fate, Saint Peter, and the god Neptune. Withal, there's not an insurancer in the kingdom, from Lloyd's on down, who will touch your case for less than a sum you can never, as astronomers, possibly afford. Yet if we were dead, Dixon points out, the Royal Navy observing the cost of a burial at sea, what further expenses might there be? You are independent of a family, sir. Incredible! Why, you must be a very sorceress, Dixon having already spied beneath her layers of careful decrepitude, as he will later tell Mason, a shockingly young woman hard at work, with whom, country lout that he is, he can't help from flirting. But Mason is now growing anxious. Are we in danger then? What have you heard? Silently, she passes him a soiled broadside sheet, upon which a printed description of varied services and fees therefore. What's this? You won't do curses? My insurance. Prohibitive. She cackles, as the young fancy the old to cackle. I believe what you seek is under intelligence, naval. Half a crown, if you insist. Dixon? What? You want me to put in half of that? We can't very well charge this to the society, can we? Do I shame you, sir, Hepsie, too pert by decades? Oh, all right, Mason digging laboriously into his purse, sorting out coins and mumbling the amounts. Dixon looks on in approval. You spend money like a very Geordie. He means no harm, lass, beaming, nudging Mason urgently with his toe, as bullies shift about in the dark, and boats wait with muffled oars to ferry them against their will over to a life they may not return from. The smell of the great anchorage, smoke, pitch, salt, and decay, sweeps in fitfully. Sirs, attend me, the coins having silently vanished, since last week, the year of marvels, when Hawk drove conflans upon the lee shore at Quiberon Bay, the remnants of the Brest fleet have been understandably short of elan, or esprit, or whatever they styled that stuff over there, excepting now and then, among the captains of smaller frigates, souls as restless to engage in personal tactics as disposed to sniff at national strategy. Mortmain, Le Chisel, Saint Fou, mad dogs all, any of them and others likely at any time to sail out from Brest, indifferent to risk, tete-a-tete as ever with the end of the world, seeking new objects of a resentment inexhaustible. Oh dear, Mason clutching his head. Suppose we sail upon some other day, then. Mason, pray you, 'tis the age of reason, Dixon reminds him. We're men of science. To us must all days run alike the same number of identical seconds, each proceeding in but one direction, irreclaimable. If we would have omens, why, let us recall that the astronomer's symbol for Friday is also that of the planet Venus herself, a good enough omen, surely. I tell you, the young impostress, merrily raising a finger, French frigates will be where they will be, day of the week be damned, especially Saint Fou, and let Chagrin Hay. You know of the École de Piraterie at Toulon? Famous. He has lately been appointed to the Kittian chair. Mason and Dixon would like to stay, the one to fuss, the other to flirt, but they now notice a considerable queue has formed behind them. There are gamesters in trouble, sweethearts untrue, sailors with no one to bid them adieu, roistering fops, and the mass bond brigade, all impatient to chant with the Sibylline maids singing, Let us go down to Hepsie's tonight. Maybe tonight she'll show us the light. Maybe she'll cackle and maybe she'll cry. But for two and a kick she won't spit in your eye. She warned Remi's sailor, beware of the bolt, and the Corsica bound of Paoli's revolt. From lottery tickets to history's end, she's the miserable bug-bitten sailor's best friend, singing, "Let us go down." Nice doing business with you, boys. Hope I see yous again, with an amiable nod for Dixon. Back at the cockfights, Fender Belly Bodine comes lurching across their bow, curious. What did she have to say? Something about crazy frigate captains sailing out of Brest is all either of them can remember by now. Just what she told my mauve, and for free. Good. We'll have a fight, gents. And if it's Le Chisel, we'll have a stern chase, too. Back on old HMS Inconvenience, we wasted many a day and night watching that fancy counter get smaller by the minute. And when he'd opened far enough from us, it pleased him to put out the lantern in his cabin, as if to say, "Tout fini, time for a frappe le snack." Skipper saw the light go out. He always muttered the same thing. The dark take you, Le Chisel. And might you as readily vanish from my life. And then we'd slacken sail and come about, and the real work would begin, beating away, unsatisfied once more against the wind, foretopman Bodine, pausing to squeeze the nearest rongers of a young Pole who has shimmered in from some opium dream in the vicinity. Like Hepsie, Mauve is far from what she pretends. Most men are fooled into seeing a melancholy waif, when in reality she's the most cheerful of little butter biscuits, who has escaped look matronly, only thanks to that constant exertion demanded by the company of sailors. She and Hepsie are in fact share quarters in Portsea, as well as a wardrobe noted, even here upon the point, for its unconsidered use of printed fabrics. She's a wonderful old woman, Hepsie, says Mauve. Fortunes have been won heeding her advice, as lost ignoring it. She tells you beware. Why, she has reckoned your odds and found them long. She is Lloyd's of Portsmouth, believe her. Later, around dawn, earnestly needing a further word with Hepsie or the dog, Mason can find no trace of either, search as he may, nor will anyone admit to knowing them at all, let alone their whereabouts. He will continue to search, even unto scanning the shore as the Seahorse gets underway at last, on Friday, 9th of January, 1761.